it was hard for us to have really sensitive conversations. It was hard for us to be really honest with one another about perhaps something that you were doing that was hurting me, because your little boy would come out and start protecting you or put up your dukes because you would sense that we were in a fight, where you would predict my reaction. And then I would do the same thing. I was very defensive, again, defensive reactive. I was very hard to talk to. I was very hard to speak truth into. So then we would avoid it. And that would lead to resentment, sometimes being passive aggressive with one another.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah.
Pride was really keeping us guarded. We were very armored up individually. It kept us in a place of being very reactive. Looking back, I can really see how pride was the deadbolt on the door to everything that Dante and I were really, truly longing for in the marriage. Deeper intimacy, more honest communication, kindness, safety, deeper friendship, more fun and play, better emotional connection with one another. Welcome back to the Daily Surrender. Today's episode is part 2 of a series that I started in October with my husband, Dante. And it took us a beat to find the time and the space to record our second episode. Yes, we live together. Yes, we share a life together. And it is still a challenge to really coordinate our schedules and our energy and our focus. But we found time and we really are feeling it. So we're excited to sit down together today for our second episode as a couple. Back in October, when we recorded our very first episode together, we started to dive into a little bit of our story, being married for 27 years, tearing the house down in the marriage, and looking at all the areas where things weren't working for us so that we could rebuild a relationship, rebuild a marriage that's really strong, which is what it is today. And Dante and I have felt really prompted, guided, called to share some of what we've learned with you guys. And it fits really well into the theme of this podcast. The theme, obviously, of the Daily Surrender is surrendering and letting go of all the things that get in the way of us living out our true identity, living the fullness of life, living a life filled with freedom and peace and joy, living as our true essence of self. That's what we all crave. It's what we all desire. And many of us are in relationships. And it can get messy when you're in a relationship. It can be very challenging when you're in a relationship because there's a big temptation to put blame on the other person for the things that feel like inadequacies in your life. It's really easy to play the victim and to point your finger at the other person and say, hey, they're the persecutor here. I'm the victim. But the truth is, it takes two people doing their own work, being really honest, introspective, reflective, and coming together to create the third thing. If you missed a part 1 of the episode, you can go back and listen to that if you want to hit pause on this one, or just jump backwards and hear a little bit more of our story. But today really feels very perfect for Dante and I to be recording this, because everything that we'll be talking about today really requires readiness. It requires willingness, humility, intention, and a softening of the parts of ourselves that once were protecting us, but no longer are serving not only us, but the relationship, the marriage, and as I just said, the individuals inside the marriage. So what Dante and I are going to be sharing today is some of the wisdom that we have gathered throughout our 27 plus years of marriage and relationship. And again, just as we were in the first episode, we're not coming at you as we know it all. We've got it all down. We do it all perfectly. This is a shiny marriage story, happily ever after. Ours has been a good marriage. And yet there were years in the marriage where good became not good enough. And there were years where things on the outside and even to a degree on the inside were really functioning well. They were functional. It was really familiar. We had a rhythm, we had systems, but we didn't feel like we were flourishing. And what we really came to realize was that pride was running the show. It was like running the show in the background for both of us. And it was working against us in all that we were desiring in the marriage. Looking back, I can really see how pride was the deadbolt on the door to everything that Dante and I were really truly longing for in the marriage: deeper intimacy, more honest communication, kindness, safety, deeper friendship, more fun and play, better emotional connection with one another, deepening of our trust between each other. And pride was really keeping us guarded. We were very armored up individually. It kept us in a place of being very reactive. And in that, we weren't hearing one another in the way that we needed to hear one another. And we also weren't hearing from God. We were very blocked. That armor kept us very blocked. And that armor really was constructed mostly of pride. And that's what this episode is going to dive into today. That's what we're going to talk about. We're going to talk about how do we actually speak and receive truth inside of a marriage? What does it look like to be humble in real time? You've heard me before on previous episodes talk about the importance of humility. And humility really being the hinges on the door that swing it wide open. We can't have honesty and we can't find truth without humility. And if pride's there, you're blocking all of that. You're blocking all the things that you're really actually desiring deep down. So we're going to take a look at how pride blocks us from growth. We're going to take a look at why we need humility and how that can lead to honesty and the ability to speak truth to one another and also receive truth from one another, and how inevitably in a relationship we trigger one another and how those triggers that arise in relationships, especially these sacred containers of a committed long-term relationship or partnership, how they're gifts and they really can become the greatest of gifts and tools that elevate our consciousness, deepen our connection, and refine our character. Because iron sharpens iron. And when you're in a sacred relationship, a committed relationship, you want to continue to sharpen one another and grow, not use those swords to stab and hurt one another. We're not here to wound. We're here to really, truly awaken. And there's nothing more beautiful than awakening collectively together with your partner. We're not here to tear one another down. We're here to reveal and again, reveal truth to one another and not punish one another for not getting it right or perfect, but instead to help free one another and free one another from, or help one another find that freedom from the parts of ourselves that are not really truly aligned with our divine design, aligned with Christ consciousness, aligned with the truest identity that God's inviting us to embody. So take a breath. I know that was a very long introduction, but I wanted to give you a good background before Dante and I dive into the conversation. Open up your hearts today. Again, breathe, listen. It's our story. We're not telling you our story because you need to experience all of this exactly as we have. We're sharing our story so that perhaps you can see yourself in a part of it, maybe a part of how we used to be. Maybe it's a part of how we are today. Maybe we're sharing something that you have never even thought of. And in that, we're really inviting you to enter into a really sacred conversation with us. So get your cup of tea, or if you're walking or driving, whatever you're doing, open yourself up to a conversation about truth, humility, and the spiritual work of being married with God at the top of your hierarchy in your marriage. So, without further ado, let's dive in. Welcome back to the show, Dante.
Thank you for having me.
We're going to dive in the intro. People have already heard that you and I have been at this for over 27 years, if we count our entire relationship of 33 years. And there came that time in our relationship about 5, 6 years ago when we were really at a place where we knew that there was more for us. And people listening to the podcast have heard my story with my dark night of the soul, finding Molly, really taking a step, an intentional step to work on myself. And at the same time, I wasn't really happy in our marriage. So if people want to get into that part of the story, they can go back and listen to the first episode that we did a few months ago together. But what you and I really want to talk about today is the whole idea of how important it is to be able to speak truthfully and honestly to each other.
Because that was a big challenge for us. We didn't have honesty for a very long time.
I was really defensive and reactive because I had my own stories that I was walking around with, that I was inherently wrong. I was very conflict avoidant. Anytime that somebody challenged me and pointed out perhaps one of my flaws, I would get very, very defensive, very reactive. I would act like a victim. So I would push back on you. So I wasn't the easiest person to be honest with. So my ego was in the way a lot.
That's humble. Okay. Yeah. I think I came from a background where I was raised in a house with a lot of emotion, where reality was not necessarily to be addressed, that there was a fair amount of, avoidance and put your head in the sand and pretend the thing doesn't exist when you don't want to acknowledge it. And then what I learned was, well, if you pointed out certain things, it was, you'd get attacked. And so I came into the relationship with that baggage. And so it's not a surprise that, first of all, that we were drawn together. And then that on top of that, my initial way of handling anything that I thought you wouldn't approve of was to simply not tell you, or lie if directly confronted. But a lot of it is just lying by omission, you know. And then you add to that the abandonment, and there's a fear of I would lose you, you would abandon me. If I was completely honest, if you truly saw who I am. And so I think, there's a lot of incentive to not be completely honest when you don't know who you are, and you don't know and love that person. And of course, that gets us to the other theme that we've been talking about, which is, how do you get to know that person? It starts with humility, which might not be the way you'd think that you do. But when you finally humble yourself to say, I am flawed, I don't have it all figured out, I actually don't know what I'm doing, God has this way of saying, okay, then try this, try me. And so I think for us, and we alluded to this on our first podcast, you had your work first with Molly, and you began going down this whole path of this theme that we've talked about so many times, which is kindness, love, respect, and a safe place to talk and share, KLRS. And you started showing up for our conversations for that.
Yeah. And for our listeners, I just want to explain what that even is.
Go ahead.
So when I decided to start doing some of my own deeper, more honest, introspective work, which is what I hired Molly to help me with, I, early on in my work with her, realized that if I didn't become humble, I couldn't do it. I was wrestling with her a lot. My pride was in the way. She was definitely triggering me because there were moments where I perceived that she was telling me what to do, or I was wrong, or I was doing something wrong, or she was pointing out a mortal flaw in me. And it was really, really uncomfortable. And I had to decide whether I was going to continue working with her and go all in, essentially on myself, or stop working with her. So I really started stepping into humility probably before you did.
Without question.
Yeah. And the catalyst for that, again, was I couldn't do this deeper, more introspective work if I had pride in the way. Pride really, really was a deadbolt on the door for me. So I started to become more and more humble. And in that, Molly taught me and us. At that point, you were working with Molly, and she was really trying to help the two of us individually, and then in our marriage, and in our parenting, and in our whole family. She was really trying to help soften us, like soften me. And she taught us this system, simple. She said, every time that you have a conversation or you approach someone or how you treat someone else, do it with KLRS. And that's kindness. Are you speaking kindly? Is your body language kind? Are you paying attention? You're not distracted by your phone. Are you being loving? Are you everything? Again, body language, tone, voice, posture. Are you in a loving stance with that person? Are you showing respect to that other person? And then are you giving them a safe place to share? And that was really, really important for both of us. And I remember early on in the days of using KLRS between each other, and then we taught it to the kids, and we had a chart on the fridge so that we could hold one another accountable, because what we were realizing is even our tone with each other was very biting at times. It wasn't respectful, it wasn't kind, it wasn't loving, and it certainly wasn't safe for each other. So that was a very simple structure for us and a way for us to think about how we were coming at one another that really helped to start to soften the both of us.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah. So I started approaching everything with more KLRS. Another thing that really was helpful for me was to remind myself that we're not enemies. You're not my enemy. We're on the same team. We want the same thing. We're here and we desire a healthier marriage. We're working on becoming better people in the relationship and better for one another. And in order to do that, we had to be humble and we had to take a look at our part. It's really easy to point the finger and say, you're doing this, you're making me, you are contributing to XYZ. That's easy. But the challenging part is to say, what's my part?
Mm-hmm.
Yeah.
But I think for both of us, the little boy and the little girl were at the helm. So here we were in these grown-up bodies trying to lead grown-up lives, letting the wounded and little boy inside me and the wounded little girl inside you man the controls. And it wasn't until we were able to find our own respective humility that we were able to say, who's at the helm here? I think that really was the turning point. And certainly for me, it was. Certainly for me, it was finally being able to break down and say, I don't have all the answers. I am flawed and I am not the smartest person on earth. That was very hard, especially when it was the only identity I knew. And that was the letting go, is being willing to let go of the only identity I knew of myself, which was really a faith leap. And I think that we've realized that, having the proper hierarchy in our marriage, in our lives, and by the proper hierarchy, I mean God at the top, and then us, and then our kids. We were what's the right word? I want to say awash. We would roll with the tides, just constantly in a state of unmoored quasi chaos. You know what I mean? That's how it felt all the time. High tension, high volatility, because each of us, again, was the little boy, the little girl, looking at the other and saying, why won't you give me what I need? Why won't you give me what I need? And when we finally both said, hey, I'm realizing that I have a lot that I need, but I'm not in touch with that is. And I'm ashamed of what a lot of that is. And so I'm trying to get what I think I need. And I'm not even trying to do it transparently. I'm doing it unconsciously. And that's where, to the point you were just making, we get into the whole, we're not teammates, we're fighting against one another. So anyway, I think certainly I know for me was when I found the humility and I was able to let go and say, okay, I'm going to be vulnerable and acknowledge that I don't have it all. And maybe that does mean I'm nothing. And I'm going to step out into that and basically confess that. That was when we finally had truth with a lowercase t, honesty between us. And as you had softened, you were receptive to that, and it takes both, because I had to bear my vulnerable self, and you had to get to a place where you wouldn't attack that.
Yeah, where I could hold space for you to share your most vulnerable parts of yourself and open up with honesty and hold you in love and grace with a lot of compassion, and trust God in you, and trust that you are a work in progress, that my safety is not actually anchored and rooted in you, like your flesh, like your that part of you, but it's really anchored with God. And when we say that we had to rearrange the hierarchy, so to speak, in our marriage and put God at the top, that's really what we're talking about. Because when we weren't doing that, when God was wherever, God fell in our relationship, we were putting ourselves higher, and we were trying to love the other person without coming from source. We were trying to love them from our wounds. I was trying to love you from my defensiveness, from my inadequacies, from my limiting beliefs and these constructs that I had erected from, say, my own childhood. And that was really hard. I couldn't do it in the way that I needed to do it. But when I brought God in and I came from that, and I continually reminded myself, okay, Jen, you have everything that you need. This relationship that you're in is very blessed. It's holy ground. It's here for you. It's here so that you can travel through life as partners. You can challenge one another to grow, your iron sharpening iron. You can reflect God back on one another. You can cheer one another on when you're in process. And that's a beautiful gift. And it really helped me to stop looking to you for the things that I was never supposed to look to you for.
Mm.
Those are things that can only come from God, from Creator, Source, Father. And that was huge for me in the journey of really being able to hold space for you, speak to you honestly, share some really hard things with you. Up until that point, before we both really stepped into humility, like big step into humility, it was hard for us to have really sensitive conversations. It was hard for us to be really honest with one another about perhaps something that you were doing that was hurting me, because your little boy would come out and start protecting you or put up your dukes because you would sense that we were in a fight, or you would predict my reaction. And then I would do the same thing. I was very defensive, again, defensive reactive. I was very hard to talk to. I was very hard to speak truth into. So then we would avoid it. And that would lead to resentment, sometimes being passive aggressive with one another.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah.
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 Well, we can talk about a little bit of specifics, because I think some of the challenges we had are very common. A lot of couples are dealing with them. I mean, having an abandonment wound means that my little boy was trying to use you for comfort and reassurance that I'm worthy, that I'm lovable. And that comes off to you as very needy and very little boy, and not really masculine in an attractive way, right?
Yes.
Okay.
And led to me mothering you a lot.
Yeah. But I believe that we were both primed for that when we met, which is why we fit so easily, because you were looking for someone to mother, to rescue, and I was looking for someone to rescue me. And so, yeah, it made a lot of sense for a long time. And as you said, I think we were sort of like living on sugar. Like we were getting through, we were surviving, but inside we were not as strong as we needed to be. We weren't fortified.
Fortified, that's a good word. When we look at the spiritual purpose of marriage, today, I really see the spiritual purpose of marriage as being two people coming together, where two or more are gathered. There I am, right? And there I am in my name. And it's coming together to strengthen and sharpen one another, and to reflect God back on one another, and to help one another grow through our wounds.
Mm-hmm.
Or perhaps we can call them, in mystical Judaism and Kabbalah, it's called tikkuns. So we come in with these soul corrections, and we're going to find the person that is going to help us soul correct. You said we were like two pieces of a puzzle coming together. We were like magnets drawn to one another because of these wounds that we both carried. And we have been the perfect person to challenge one another. And it took us a while to really realize that, and to realize, oh, wait, everything here is for us. All of the challenges that we've had, your wounds and my wounds fitting together so beautifully, and challenge for such a long time, really has been for us, because it's here for our soul's growth and evolution. How am I ever going to get over some of the things that I have had to work on? My hypervigilance. From a very, very young age, I became very hypervigilant, very sensitive to energy, scanning the room, wanting to avoid conflict. I was a people pleaser. Mm-hmm. And so coming together with you has really helped me and challenged me like no other relationship, to dig really, really deep, and to introspect, and to stop finding my safety in external circumstances, in people, stop finding my worth in other people. because I would put so much on you.
Mm-hmm. Can you give an example?
Yeah. So you, without getting into details that are very personal, you had some coping mechanisms that you took into marriage that had been there since you were very young. You were a latchkey kid. You were raised by a single mom as an only child. You were alone a lot. And so there were things that you would do to self-soothe and entertain yourself, right? And I didn't like them and I wanted to control them. Like early on in the marriage, I'm like, I wanted to control that. You had a high need to be alone and like go into your man cave, because that's how you grew up. You grew up in a cave, right? And in bubbling yourself. And I didn't like that. I was one of four. There was no privacy. And I really tried to control that. And I would become very hypervigilant to your moods. And maybe when you would go off into your cave a little bit more, and very, very sensitive. I'd be reading your moods, just much like I read my father's moods growing up.
Mm-hmm.
And then I would get very controlly and I'd start making comments at you, which would have you turn back at me and make comments back. Again, that's that passive aggressiveness because we're not being honest with one another. This is before we could really receive honesty.
Mm-hmm.
And so here I was feeling deeply insecure. And then that triggered me becoming very controlly. And you didn't like that. You didn't want to be controlled. Your father was very controlling. So that made you push back at me. And so we would start really, really butting heads. And over time, in the past few years, where we've really opened up communication between one another, we've really been able to step in with humility to being able to speak very truthfully and honestly with one another. I have shared with you that I don't want to live this way. I don't like being hypervigilant and thinking that all is only well in my world if you are really well or are well all the time. If you are never feeling stressed or insecure or needing to rely on old habits to self-soothe yourself and regulate yourself. Because if I see you doing that, then all of a sudden I'm unsafe. And that's not where I'm supposed to be actually finding my safety.
Mm-hmm.
So we've been able to come to a place today where we can open that up honestly and open up that dialogue. So it's not an attacking conversation or an accusatory conversation or me saying, I'm better than you because I don't do those things. Meanwhile, I'm only controlling you and being hypervigilant and noticing because that's my stuff.
Mm-hmm.
Right? So that's an example of how we went from working against one another in that area, and we've really come to being able to work with each other,
Mm-hmm.
with one another, and be really sensitive to each other when we're speaking truth. And I can today say to you, Dante, I am feeling triggered, and I know that that trigger is something that I need to look at inside of me. I know that the trigger is me feeling unsafe, and that's always an invitation for me to root deeper with where true safety is found with God. And can you also help me here? Can you share with me what might be going on with you instead of hiding it from me? Can you do it honestly? And can I receive that with grace and compassion? Because something I think is really important for people to understand and to know that if you're in a relationship where you're both committed to growth and you're committed to your individual growth, your spiritual growth, which I think is the most important growth that there is, and your spiritual growth really encompasses everything else you do. So if you're in a relationship like that, it's really important that you are able to hold space for the other person's resurrection process that feels like death to them. And be very tender and gentle and kind and loving and give that person safe space to be able to share and to be able to express the messy and the painful and the ugly as they walk through their own process of dying to the false identities that they've carried, and vice versa, right? And We're here in this episode talking about the importance of being able to be honest with each other and truthful with each other. The honesty. So, for instance, if there's something that you might want to bring up with me that might, I mean, it's something that's bothering you, you don't want to hold it in. And it can also help my own process of dying to self and resurrecting. I have to trust that you're going to hold me and what I'm going through with sensitivity. Am I making sense to you there?
Yes. Yes, you're making sense. I think one of the things that's going through my mind as you're talking is thinking about some of the fundamental differences between us in terms of how we look at the world, how we hear, how we communicate, being man and woman and being different, and creating a space where you feel safe is a consistent theme, you know? And so coming to terms with that and understanding what that really means, I think has been a big unlock for me, that it's not just physical safety. It's emotional safety. It's feeling safe in the way that says, I can speak truthfully to you, Dante, and feel safe about your reaction, which was a big area that I think was very hard to put our finger on in saying, you have this sense, you feel unsafe under certain circumstances. What is it that you feel unsafe about? And it was often about, I can't tell you this. There's the certain things I can't tell you about. And I think that the common thread between those was there were certain subjects that you didn't feel safe addressing with me.
Yeah, because you used to be
Yes.
very
Vulnerable.
prickly
Correct.
before you stepped
100%.
into humility.
Right. And there's now that we operate in a much more healthy way around honesty in particular, there's still different ways that we have to talk to one another. There's ways that I speak to you if I share something that I want to address, and there's ways that you speak to me. And I think I think that you probably express to me things you don't like more than I express things that I don't like to you, largely because there's not a lot of things I don't like, if that makes sense. I'd like to believe that what I do is whenever you do or say something that I like, I make a point to tell you.
I'm glad that you brought that up because we tend to focus so much, like even in this conversation, we're focusing on the honesty with negative things, right? Like the more challenging things. But there's also honesty with the good things. Today, you said, "Hey, Jen, I really love when you do that." And there was something that I had done earlier today. Oh, actually, I was showing you affection, and we took a moment early on in our busy day, and we just wrapped our arms around each other, and we were kissing in the kitchen, and we just had a moment, and then we went on with our day.
Mm-hmm.
And you said, "Hey, I like that." So that's you being honest with me so that I know that that's something that you really like. So I appreciate you bringing that into the conversation too.
Yeah. Well, I think we've both learned that with kids, with coworkers, with one another, that people hear it when you say to them, hey, when you said this or when you did this, that was great. Man, that sinks in. People pay attention to that. When you say to people, I don't like how you did this or I don't like how you did that, what you're saying to them is there's a whole infinite possibilities of things. And this thing is the one thing you did. Don't do that. It's like, okay, that still leaves an infinite number of possible ways I could be wrong, as opposed to, look, let's assume I'm going to be wrong more than 50% of the time. So when I'm right, tell me, because that gives me some direction. That helps me understand when I'm in the right space and when I'm not. And I think that works with everyone. And what I find is when you do something, say something in any way, whether it's what you said, how you said it, when you said it, whatever, I point it out to you. I'll say to you, I loved how you said this or the way that you did that. And here's why. Here's what it made me feel. I think understanding what healthy masculine, what healthy feminine looks like was another integral step for us. And once we both understood that in the same terms, and we stepped out of the mothering space and the little boy space and stepped into the grown man's, grown woman, husband, wife space, we've been like on this positive loop because we're both finally in our comfortable spaces, our natural spaces, our natural energies. There's trust. There is, trust is a deep word. There's a feeling of safety on both sides. And I think we both lean into honesty now.
We do. And it's taken time because trust
Sure.
is earned, right? It's not given off the bat. And so we had to really learn how to trust one another in a different way. Trust that we're not going to hurt one another as we're being more honest with each other, receiving honesty and giving it as well. And the more trust that we've built, the more that calls us to lean in more and lean in more. And you brought up being more in our healthy masculine and feminine. And feminine, the feminine is meant to be really soft and fluid and flowing and creative and expressive. And when we're walking around with this armor of pride because of our own crap underneath it, the anxiety, the fear, all the things, right? That armor hardens us and it doesn't allow us to be feminine and soft and gentle and creative and expressive in that way. And we come off way too masculine. And then it becomes very emasculating for the man, especially when we're approaching men with like all this hardness and toughness. And we're barking and we're ordering around and mothering too. Mothering. There's a lot of mothering there. So in all of this, bringing it back into the conversation that we're having here today about the importance of being able to be honest with your partner in a relationship and how that requires humility. All of this unlocks in us the masculine and the feminine, something that you and I touched upon recently in a conversation, a very honest conversation that we were having about our needs, our feelings and our needs. And you said to me, Jen, there are some things like, I know you're very, very sensitive. And I am very sensitive. And you are too.
Mm-hmm.
And my sensitivity is one of my superpowers, but all superpowers have a shadow side, right? So my sensitivity can cross over easily into hypervigilance because of the things that I've dealt with in my past. So I don't want to go there. And I was communicating something to you because I could feel myself teetering on that line of hypervigilant versus just being sensitive and noticing. And I needed some communication from you. I needed to know that you are on it with what I was noticing in you. And you said, Jen, that's fair. And sharing with you and communicating with you is fair. But for a man to share all their demons and their dark things and the things that I'm working through and the things that I'm concerned about and worrying about, to share them all with you isn't going to help you feel safe, right? That's going to create more worry in you. So men need men. That's why men need men. They need brotherhood. That's so important, just like women need women. I don't know what I would do without my really close girlfriends. Like I have a few girlfriends that they are my go-tos. They are my safe place for me to emotionally vomit sometimes, to be witnessed, to process out loud, because women are very emotional processors. We think out loud. There's a lot of a lot. And if I were to bring all of that to you, that's too much. That would overwhelm you. That's too much. So I need my women. I need sisterhood, just like you need men. You need that brotherhood. So men, find your men. And women, find your women, so that in the partnership and the relationship you have with your spouse, with your committed partner that you're in this container with, you're not dumping too much on them and hurting them too. So be discerning in what it is that you're sharing, but communicate that, right? Like
Yeah.
I can give you the highlight reel of what I was just working through,
Sure.
right?
Yeah.
Sometimes I need a girlfriend to hold space for me, even if it's something with you. And her and I might talk it through for an hour, and then I can succinctly bring you my feelings and needs without dumping all of that on you and putting you into a position of like,
Yeah.
great.
Yeah. Yeah. Well, I think that's a great point. Because men and women communicate so differently, my experience is that women tend to say, okay, there's something that's bothering me. And what's actually unspoken is, I'm not entirely sure what it is. So I need to, as you say, vomit, but let's say lay all my cards out. And some of those might look ugly. They're possibilities, they're things I have to consider could be true. And they're horrible. Some of them are horrible. It's like literally, it's like maybe he's distracted at work. Maybe he's upset about something that he said to his parents. Maybe he's having an affair. Maybe he's like 20 other things. And a man's like, whoa, having an affair? No, actually, that's one of like 50 cards you're going to put. And you and your girlfriends are going to dispel 48 of them very quickly. And then you go, no, it's probably one of these two. And it's probably not, well, it isn't all those things, but that's, in my experience, that's how women kind of work through. And other women understand that. And so you go through it all together and they understand why you're sharing all that information. And somehow you process it all. And that's great. But to your point, you understand now that that's not how I process information. So if you come at me with all that information, I'm going to be overwhelmed, go numb, and not be of any use.
Yeah.
Right. So I think you're right. And I think also for men, it's important for us that it's different. It's like the polar opposite for men. For women, it's a constant network of support and sharing and connection. For men, it's largely isolation as it relates to like your real deep inner things. Most guys, if they're lucky, they have one really good friend. A couple guys actually have a couple good friends. And unfortunately, way too many guys have nobody. But we go into our caves and we work through our stuff. And you touched on it. And there's a reel or meme out there with a husband and wife talking, and he's making the same point. He's basically saying, like, look, there are certain things that at a certain point, I don't want to say be scared of, but let's say maybe there's things that I'm kind of going to God and saying, I've got to leave this to you because I don't know exactly where this is going to go. But if I share that with you, that's not going to make you feel safe.
Right.
It's going to unload another infinite set of possible things to worry about. What I've learned over time is, of course, we need to share. And if there's a real problem, of course, ultimately you need to know about it. But I don't need to let you know about anything that could become a problem if these other 20 things were to happen to go wrong.
So bringing it back to the importance of being truthful with one another and being able to receive truth, everything that you're saying there is something that can be shared with your partner. Like, hey, I'm on it.
Yeah.
I'm working through some things right now.
Yeah.
And I've got it. Like, that's really important to me as a woman to know that my man, he's on it and he's got it. One of the things that I know that I've struggled with, and a lot of women that I know have struggled in relationships with, is when they don't see their man perhaps introspecting or being honest with himself, and they see that he's suffering and he's doing nothing about it, right? And everything that you're saying, I now really understand. Like, that might be things that you're working through that are between you and God, or they're between you and your very close friends, or you and your therapist, right? They're not for you to share with me, but it's really important in a partnership, that you let the other person know that you're on it, that you're self-aware, that you see the things.
Yes.
Because that can worry and concern the other person.
That is still a faith leap for you as well.
Me? Yeah.
Yes.
Oh, yeah.
Because
That's a huge growth edge for me right now.
And because think about what I'm revealing to you is this, and think about how hard for a lot of women this would be to let go. It's basically saying to you, you're right, sweetheart. Your intuition is right. I am working on something. It's something that I don't want to share with you, not because it's bad or whatever. It's because it's something that I need to work through. And you have to be willing to accept that. And I imagine for a lot of couples, there's plenty of times where a man might say that much and his wife is like, no, but I need to know what it is. And that's a lack of faith.
It is a lack of faith. And we're coming full circle in this conversation, and we're going to wrap it up because we've been on a while here, but coming full circle to why we need to rearrange the hierarchy.
that's what it is.
It all comes back to your faith. And how can you have faith if you are not embodying something greater than you, right? And it is such a beautiful, continual invitation to drop out of ego, to stop gripping the steering wheel yourself so that you can control the narrative, control the outcome, control the details of your life, and to drop back in to the divine mind of God that's inside of all of us. So anyone here who's listening to this podcast, we're like, oh, I've got some work to do on my marriage, or I definitely have areas of pride that are getting in the way. Start with taking a look at where you are feeding your fear, where you are giving power to anything outside of one. And can you come up with your own growth edge where you start to soften and let go? And maybe it's letting go and starting to communicate in a way you never have communicated it before. And you're doing it with KLRS, with kindness and love and respect, and giving the other person a safe place to share. Maybe you go find help for yourself and you're like, God, I've got a lot of pride in my way, and I've got a lot of work to do. But I really, really, really desire to soften, and to soften in faith. So there's a whole plethora of ways that you can find support on your journey. But awareness, and I really want to point this out to people too, awareness is the very first step to change. It's the first step to elevating your state of consciousness, to elevating that. And when we elevate our consciousness and we become more aware, which takes honesty, we're elevating our consciousness into the consciousness of Christ. Isn't that the goal? That we continue to step more and more and more into Christ consciousness, to do as Jesus showed us how to do.
It's hard.
It's really, really, really hard, right? It's hard. So grace and compassion for yourself, grace and compassion for others if you're on this journey with a partner.
Yes.
And continue to encourage one another. It's encouraging one another as you go along on this journey. Yeah. Anything you want to share, Dante, before we wrap up this episode?
I think this was great. I think we talked about quite a few things that we wanted to make sure we get to. I think when we come back and we continue talking, we can continue talking about the masculine and feminine. That's going to be a recurring theme. And of course, humility and the proper hierarchy, God at the top. That's also going to be a persistent theme that we'll come back to. I guess the only other thing I could think to say would be that I think it's appropriate that you likely have a lot of women who are watching or listening, and that they might hear that, the man may lead the home in some ways. The woman leads the energy in the home, and she leads the heart of the home. And so if there's any women out there right now and their marriages are not where they need to be right now, I would encourage them to look inside themselves first and think, I actually can be the catalyst. We have talked about feminine energy as a flame, and I can be the spark. And I really credit you with being the first spark that opened the door to all the progress that we've made. And that was, as you said earlier, that softening. And so softer is better.
I'll leave it at that.
I love that. Thank you. Oh, I thought of one thing that I did want to also add into this conversation, because we brought up God at the top, making God at the top of your hierarchy, really using your relationship as a spiritual journey. Something that I've really had to learn to do too is to let go of my control of your relationship with God. Your relationship with God is so personal. Mine is so personal. It doesn't have to look exactly the same way at all. We're really solid on who God is and who God is for us. And we're both very individual people. So I wanted to add that at the very end of this podcast, because there might be people here listening. Yeah, but my husband doesn't even have a relationship with God, or he doesn't go to church. And we're not here talking about religion either at all.
No.
Not at all. It's probably a whole other conversation. Making your husband try and experience God or find God or do the religious things that you do so that you feel safe, that's the wrong approach too. So that's a faith leap for you to let go and to really focus on yourself and then focus on embodying love yourself, because that vibration will be felt instead of the vibration of control. So respecting that the other person has their own personal relationship or might not yet have a relationship, but worry about yourself. When Jesus said to his disciples, and they shall know us by our love, it's so important for us individually in a relationship to really practice embodying love and being love instead of preaching love. Yeah.
Well, I think that goes along with my comment about being soft, partly. And I would also say that a recurring theme through the Bible, and certainly from Jesus' teachings, is that it's got to be an invitation, and you can't force it. You certainly can't force someone else into faith. That's futile. You can invite, you can be soft around the space, especially if you're the woman in the relationship, but you can't force. So I love that you made that comment.
Yeah, could be a whole other podcast episode, and we'll have more. We'll try and make it shorter than 2 months in between. But thanks for having this conversation here with me, Dante.
Thanks for having me on. I can't wait to see you again.
Take care. Thank you so much for hanging in there, for joining Dante and I on this conversation today. It was a really tender conversation, a very honest conversation. Every time that Dante and I sit down together and really take the time to introspect, to reflect, we're really reminded that marriage is not a static thing. It's an evolving, living covenant that asks for something different of us individually, something different of us collectively in each season of life. As we've shared with you, Dante and I are both midlifers. We are both in that midlife season of taking a good, hard, honest look at ourselves, at everything in our life, what we want to come with us, what we want more of, what we desire more of, and also what can't come with us. And it's a beautiful season. And it's a season of a lot of honesty. There's a lot of honesty that's needed in this season. And for us, as you've heard here today, it's been a season of an enormous amount of truth seeking, speaking truth to one another, receiving truth.
It's been a season of a lot of humility and so much refinement, and it's all worth it. I can tell you that confidently. It's all worth all the challenge and the hard to get where we are today. If there's one thing I hope that you take away with you today, it's this. Truth spoken in love cannot destroy a marriage. It can't. If you're coming from love, love is truth with a capital T, and you can trust truth. Come from that vibration. The only thing that really, really can destroy the marriage is pride. Truth, when it's offered in humility and received with humility, it's a two-way street. It has the power to resurrect parts of the relationship that you didn't even realize had gone dormant. Triggers are signs that something is wrong. There's something to be looked at. There's more shadow within self. And they're invitations. So when we're triggered by our partner, they're actually gifts. And really seeing it that way is part of the flipping of the script. That's something that helped Dante and I both greatly, is to realize the gift in being triggered by one another, the gift in irritating one another, because it's invited us to take a look at ourselves. It's invited us to be more humble, to be more introspective, to be more honest. And those triggers really can be revelations of where God is still shaping you, where God is still calling you deeper, where God is still removing layers that were never really part of your true identity. In marriage, we get to be mirrors for one another. We're sacred mirrors that really help each other see what's ready to be healed, what's ready to be surrendered, released, reclaimed. And when we choose humility over protection, when we choose softness over defensiveness, honesty over courage, we're opening the door to so much more intimacy, to safety, and to true union as God has designed and desires for us. We get to choose that, and we get to choose to be active participants in the creation of the sacred union. So as you leave this episode here today, maybe take a moment to reflect and ask yourself some questions. Ask yourself, where am I still guarding myself with pride in my relationship? Where am I still resisting truth that could set me free? Where am I being invited to soften into trust and faith in the relationship? Maybe you were like me and you're really guarded and armored up, and there's not a lot of softness there. Can you find some areas where you can soften just a little? Where's God inviting you to grow? I really, really appreciate you taking the time to hang with Dante and I here on this episode. It's such an honor to walk alongside of you on every one of these episodes. But to have you come inside my marriage with this man that I've been walking side by side with for 33 years, it's vulnerable, and it's also it's really special. It's really special to be able to invite you into our behind the scenes and to have you here with us. If this episode resonated with you, will you please share it with someone who needs it? We also would really appreciate if you were to like, subscribe wherever you're listening to this, to leave a review. All of that helps me get this podcast out to other people and get these messages out there into the world. And it helps us to also stay connected with you. And as always, if you need support returning to presence, I'm inviting you to grab my free at-home micro retreat, Come and Receive. There's a link here in the bio. If you want to explore working with me, you can also book a soul body discovery call. I am so grateful for you. I love you, and I'll see you on the next episode of The Daily Surrender. Thank you for joining me on The Daily Surrender. If today's episode spoke to you, I'd love to hear your reflections. Send me a message, share this with a friend, or leave a review. Remember, true healing and freedom come when we let go, surrender, and trust that God's way is so much better than our way. Until next time, my friends, keep surrendering, keep rising, and keep walking in peace.